I'm Carol. I have been around Region 1 for a very long time. Joined Region 1 Sweet Adelaide and I started singing with Hot Scores then, and I've been in Merrimack Valley since 1999. I'm an associate director with Merrimack Valley. I do some private coaching. I do lots of BVIs. But this class is not so much about our performance lives as our lives as members of a community, both within our chorus worlds, but also in the rest of the ways that that we go through life. And this does relate to the diversity inclusion kinds of conversations, but I find for a lot of people it's sort of hard to start those conversations. So let's get into it, and I will share my screen if I can find the... No, I need to open that first. You don't want to see all that. You want to see that. Oops. Now I need to shrink my people here. Can you see a full screen? Somebody's going to have to say on audio because I can't see you.
Yep, it looks good. Your slides aren't obscured, so you're fine.
Slides are up. Good. So I call this the many faces of you, and it is related to all the different ways that we move through the world and the ways that we exist and the things that we do and the people that we are and how that changes from context to context. So, and of course, in our chorus lives and in our real lives, we have our singing world. Of course, I had to grab a picture of Runaga. But we are members of families, we work, we have jobs, and in the different ways that the different parts of our lives, we sort of take on different roles, and how we feel in different situations and which roles are primary at any one time really do change. And so there's a term around this called intersectionality, and that's the idea about, who am I? How do I name myself? What are the roles I am? And I might talk about myself. I am a singer, I am a teacher, I am a student, I am white, I am Jewish, I'm a parent. All of these things are all parts of my identity, and they all are a puzzle that together makes up me. And in any given situation, those different parts may be more prominent or more important to the situation, or they may be more obvious to me in any given situation. And it will change depending on what I'm doing, depending on the context, depending on where I am and who I'm with. So first, this is where the worksheet comes in. We have many roles in our lives, many ways we name ourselves, and of course we wear many hats. So I had to pick this here. So now I'm going to stop this share for the moment because I need to go to my worksheet. If you have the worksheet, grab it, please. If you don't, I will share my copy and we'll sort of fiddle with it on screen. Assuming I can get to my Word doc here. There it is. Oh, wrong screen. Too many windows open. Way too many windows open. And I tried not to do that. Back to Zoom. Not that. Back to Zoom. There we are. Now I have a share screen button again. You'd think I had done this a million times by now. There we are. Okay. So what I started to look at here is we have, you'll notice that I've given you lots and lots and lots of spaces for places to think about who you are, not the things you do. So I give some examples here. Some of them directly relate to me, some of them don't. So think about the roles that you play within your family, and they change depending on whom you're with. Are you acting? Are you a child, a parent, or a sibling? So for example, I might say, and I'm going to pick a color. We'll do blue just because I'm blue. And so I might say, parent of college students. Spouse. Daughter. Sister. So think about all of these different relationships that you have. In another case, I might go into my community and okay, I am a neighbor. I'm a homeowner. I have been, not now, a school parent. Again, my role changes. My kids have now graduated. They're no longer in the local schools. But at the time, my role was as a school parent. Your role, even within the workplace, changes depending on what you're doing and who's in the room. I'm a teacher. I'm also a student. I'm also a classmate. I'm also a coworker. I'm a supervisee. Okay, all of those different things. Those are all different roles. They're all me in my chorus. I'm a singer. I'm a bass. I'm an associate director. Can't type and talk at the same time. Okay, so let me see if I can see folks again. I'm going to put some of you back up. There we are. So do you see where I'm heading here? All of these different things, these are all different roles. They're all parts of me, but the one that becomes the most important in a moment might change, right? I'm a riser singer, but then I have to step down and be a director. Or I'm a singer on the risers, and then I put on my hat as a section leader. My role changes depending on who I'm with and what I'm doing. And then there are some of these. Let me get rid of some extra lines that have now been pulled in. Then there are other parts of me that relate to the other parts of myself. So I'm a 52-year-old. Make me blue again so you can read it. A Jewish woman. And as I'm doing this, I hope that each of you are coming up with your own list. That's really what we're trying to do here. I am married. I'll say physically able. First generation American. English speaker. The more I think about it, the more things I can come up with. So as you go through your own list, are there pieces of your identity that you might not have thought of, or that you realize are changing even as you think about them? Go ahead and unmute if you have thoughts of things that are coming up here for you and the many roles that you play.
Well, you mentioned in your chorus, but it could be in your hobby. Because
Sure.
You could have other hobbies.
Yeah. But so even within your any given hobby, are you a group participant? Now I notice, okay, I'll go back to my list here. Maybe I'm how does my role change? Maybe I am Maybe we on my course we call ourselves QEs or evaluators, right? How am I behaving in my role as a performer versus an evaluator or a coach? That changes again. Or so within your hobby, are you an equal participant? Are you a teacher? Student? Are you a peer? Are you a collaborator? Those things change as you go through. So what then happens is, as we change these, as what happens to us in all of these roles is which role becomes most important and which role is top of mind for us changes. So let me go back to my slides. Hold on to your stop share. Sorry. And if there are questions coming up in the chat, moderators, please feel free to pop them, just unmute and share them, because once my shared screen, I can't always see the chat and the faces and any number of things at once. So let's go back to this.
It's interesting you say that the person you are rather than the things you do. Sometimes it's hard to distinguish that and to get into the language of who I am rather than what I do.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, but it's not common.
It is a different frame, and that's really where the idea for this class came from. And I should back up a little bit for those that, again, that don't know me well. I've recently returned to graduate school to work on a master's degree in music therapy. And one of the first courses that we took was a course talking about understanding power, privilege, and oppression, which sounds like a very weighty title. But what we talked about over the course of a semester was different facets of identity, and then how each of those things relate to situations in society and our own perspective. So we spent an entire week talking about just gender and gender expression, and an entire week talking about ethnicity and immigration status, and another week talking about ethnic backgrounds and language communities, and realizing that, and the crux of this is that the parts of you that in that moment are part of the majority, and this is a slide coming up, are the parts that you don't notice. And the parts of you that are in the minority in that moment are the things that become top of mind for you. So this is my next slide, getting ahead of myself. So all of these roles change and how they're important to you. Where the most obvious, when you're doing something, when you're at work, your work role becomes the most salient thing in your world. However, that too changes. Are you an employee, or are you a co-worker, or are you a supervisor, or are you a supervisee? Those things do change. Things like family responsibilities. When you're in the midst of changing diapers, you are definitely in your parent caregiver role. When you're at a religious service, that part of your identity is definitely part of top of mind. What might be less obvious is the parts of you that you don't notice. Like I said, whether what you see of yourself, what you understand of yourself, matches what you see when you walk into the room. And what becomes obvious sometimes is the place where you're no longer in the majority, the place that you do not feel like the rest of the room, which seems sort of strange. But think about that for the moment. Here's an example about language, for example. Most of us in the room probably are native English speakers. That's your primary language. And if it's not, you'll understand where we're going with this. For most of us, if you see any of these signs, you know what's going on. You almost don't even register what it is. You're used to seeing it. You know what it means. It's just there. You don't have to think about what they mean and what it means to you. What if you find yourself in among these signs? I'm really curious what the Chinese sign and why they don't want you playing trumpet in this particular place. I don't know. That might be important to understand. But if I don't speak Chinese or German or Russian, or I don't remember what language I pulled for that fourth one. It's one of the languages of India, and I don't remember which one. All of a sudden, I am very aware of the fact that I don't speak this language. That becomes top of mind in the moment, that I don't understand what's happening. And my status as an English speaker all of a sudden actually is the thing that I'm thinking about. Here, not so much. I'm taking advantage of it. I know what to do here, but I'm not thinking about reading English. Here, I'm very aware of the fact that I don't speak any of these languages. That becomes top of mind for me. Consider things like race, ethnicity, any kind of outward appearance. Consider for the moment, these are some examples somewhat related to my life. Okay, I'm a native English speaker. I traveled to Japan as a teenager, and I lived in the countryside. And I would get on a train, and I would be the only Caucasian person in the entire train. Was I very aware of all of a sudden being a Caucasian American? You bet. What about our identification, gender identification? As women, we walk into a Sweet Adeline's convention, and I do say female identifying because that's another distinction that we don't always make. But if around the corner and it was a carpentry convention, there might be a few women there. Would I be very aware of being the only woman in the room? Probably. How about in our contest gear? Right? If you're walking down the hall of a hotel dressed to the nines in sequins and false eyelashes, if you're on your way to the stage, it would not feel weird at all. If you suddenly had to leave and go home and you had to stop at the grocery store on the way home, would you be just a little aware of the fact that you didn't look like everybody else? Age is one. In this room, in general, 52 is probably pretty average. My work last year in a nursing home, I was a little kid. I was the age of the child or grandchildren of many people I was working with. And then the following day, I went to be a student in graduate school. Most of my classmates are my children's age or younger. Am I aware of being 52 in that room? You bet. And I speak to religion as well. I live in New Hampshire, which the Jewish population is 0.01%. When I go to Israel, it becomes background again. I don't have to notice that. Consider if you walked into any one of these 4 rooms. Consider for yourself. Nobody here looks threatening. Everybody's smiling. But for most of us, none of these rooms looks a lot like us. Would you feel comfortable walking in? Even if they were smiling and welcoming? How would that make you feel? Would you join? Would you feel like you could? Or would you suddenly feel very much aware of how you feel different? So let's pick up a little bit here. I would like everybody to join a small chat. How many do we have total?
Right now, there's 14, including all of us who are promoted as hosts. So maybe 11 guests, give or take.
So let's do rooms of 3 to 4 people. And that can include admins. We can sort of maybe leave the admins in one group and we can drop in and out. But I think having this kind of conversation is nice to have a real small group so that you can really get to know each other. Please take the time to introduce yourselves. I know we do have guests who are not even from this region. Please introduce yourself and the kinds of roles that you do have in your chorus and maybe other things that are important to you. Your favorite smell and something that others might find surprising about you. Those are just ways to sort of do a quick little icebreaker. And then consider some of the roles that you came up with in your own brainstorm. And then put into mind these things that I was talking about in the last couple of minutes. when did one of those roles suddenly become surprisingly important and top of mind for you that you might not have noticed before? And how did that affect what you did or how you spoke? Who did you speak to? What did you do? What were you inhibited from doing something, or were you enabled to do something? And make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak. Listen carefully to each other. We'll take about 10, maybe 15 minutes at the most. Take a turn to really listen to what each other has to say. And then I'd like everybody to that are willing to share again with the whole group. So let's just set up random breakouts, please.
I have 3 breakout rooms. Could you pop that text into the chat so that everyone can see it when they're in their breakout rooms to remind them of the end goal?
Sure, let me do that. And you're going to get to my funky slide that I tried to change later. There we go. View, present, so it's nice and big. So how does this fit in with the larger conversation, which I did want to make sure we loop back around to before we wrap for the afternoon. And that is that we are trying to talk more about, have these conversations around diversity and inclusion. And for a lot of us, that feels like a very foreign conversation. It's something that we haven't had to talk about because we haven't been in that position of being in the minority, being discriminated against. So I wanted to put us in this position of finding an opportunity for what that feels like in our own lives, for those of us that may not have had what we think is an entry point into these conversations, and to start thinking about, sometimes I need to be aware of this other piece, different parts of who I am and how I present and how I act. And sometimes they are more or less important in where we're going. And so taking this as an opportunity to open the door to those harder conversations and to remember what it was like to be in that room with people you didn't know, to remember what it was like to walk into a situation where you feel really uncomfortable, and it's not because the people around you aren't being nice to you. There may be a reason where you find yourself hyper aware of who you are and how you're different. And being able to have that kind of empathy is a way for us to help have these harder conversations and be able to think about how this idea of identity and intersectionality and can really help us think about the ways that diversity and inclusion are important. For some people, those pieces of being uncomfortable are a lot more constant, and understanding that perspective for folks, I think, is really important to us all. Questions, thoughts to toss out into the air before we take our leave? Anything?
I think this has been a really valuable experience, and I'd like to see more of this. I'm hoping, Carol, you'll if we get the word out that how you took us. Wait a minute, my alarm just went on. Deal with that.
I'm running out of time. Sally's alarm is going off.
No, if you can, we need to let people know that this was uncomfortably comfortable. So
Thank you, Sally. It is something that I've been actively involved in recently, which is why Karen asked me to teach this class. As a bit of a preview of where I would like this to go, I've been involved in an ongoing series with Halo Quartet, which is an all African American barbershop quartet. And 2 of the singers, one's a music therapist and one is a clinical social worker. And they use barbershop music as a way to talk about racism and discrimination. And it's a fantastic series. And I'm really hoping that we'll get to do something with Halo Quartet as a region eventually. But I do think it's important. I think having this this kind of perspective, I think, is just a different way to come at it. And I hope that it's helpful. I hope that it was an experience that people enjoyed and got a little bit of a tweak in maybe how they perceive these kinds of conversations. I'm glad to be a resource. I hope that people take these ideas and run with them. I love my little, taking a look around this room now. Are there pieces, are there things that you see in yourself or things that are different from yourself? Where are the lines we draw? Where are the connections we can make, and how they relate to who we are and how we interact with each other?
Thank you, Carol. I thought it was such a fascinating experience to go someplace where I was uncomfortable. It does open up new pathways of perspective.
Thanks, Wendy.
So it was a really good idea. Thank you for that.